If you can't accept help from others, you're not stubborn, you're not difficult, and you're definitely not broken. You're carrying something much deeper, something that was carved into you long before you even realized it was there. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you will completely change how you see your own independence. Here's the thing nobody talks about. Your inability to accept help isn't a personality flaw. It's a survival strategy. And it started when you were too young to understand what was happening. Most people see someone who refuses help and think they're just proud. They just need to let people in. But psychology shows us something completely different. Your resistance to receiving support is actually a set of deep psychological wounds, formed in moments when you needed someone and the world taught you a devastating lesson. You learned to never need anyone again. Let's talk about what's really going on. Because there are 4 specific independence wounds that activate every single time someone offers you help. And recognizing them might be the first step toward actually healing. The first wound is what psychologists call the betrayal of vulnerability. And it usually starts in childhood. Here's what happened. You needed something. Maybe you needed emotional support. Maybe you needed physical help. Maybe you just needed someone to show up. And you asked. You reached out. You were vulnerable. And whoever was supposed to catch you, didn't. Maybe they dismissed you. Maybe they used it against you later. Maybe they helped, but made you feel so guilty, so small, so indebted that you swore you'd never put yourself in that position again. Research on attachment theory shows that when children's needs are consistently unmet or met with punishment, they develop what's called avoidant attachment. Translation, they learn that needing people is dangerous. That vulnerability equals pain. So, your brain did something incredibly smart. It built a wall. It said, we're never doing that again. We'll handle everything ourselves. And now, decades later, when someone offers help, even with the purest intentions, that old wound activates. Your nervous system screams danger. Not because the person offering help is unsafe, but because the act of receiving it takes you back to that original betrayal. You're not being difficult. You're protecting that younger version of you who got hurt. The second wound is the competence equals worth equation. And this one's insidious because it masquerades as confidence. Somewhere along the way, you learn that your value as a person was directly tied to your ability to handle things alone. Psychology shows that many high achievers, especially those who grew up in achievement-oriented or critical environments, internalize the belief that struggle equals strength and asking for help equals weakness. Think about it. Were you praised most when you figured things out on your own? Were you admired for being independent, self-sufficient, the one who never needed anyone? Here's the trap. That praise felt good. It became your identity. The capable one. The strong one. The one who has it all together. But underneath, there's a terrifying equation. If I need help, I lose my value. If I can't do this alone, I'm not enough. Studies on perfectionism reveal that people with this wound often have what researchers call conditional self-worth. They only feel valuable when they're performing, achieving, managing, and succeeding without assistance. So when someone offers help, it's not just about the task. It's about your entire sense of self. Accepting help feels like admitting you're not who you've built yourself up to be. But here's the truth they never told you. Your worth was never contingent on your independence. You were always enough, even in your neediest moments. The third wound is what trauma researchers call hypervigilance against disappointment. And it's one of the most protective, most painful wounds you can carry. This wound forms when you've been let down so many times that your brain creates a simple rule. Expect nothing from anyone, and you'll never be disappointed again. Research on learned helplessness and its inverse, learned self-reliance, shows that when people experience repeated unreliability from others, their brains adapt. They stop reaching out, not because they don't want connection, but because the anticipation of disappointment is more painful than the loneliness of doing everything alone. Here's how it shows up. Someone offers to help, and immediately, your brain runs through every scenario where they'll let you down. They'll forget. They'll do it wrong. They'll start and not finish. They'll make it about them. They'll hold it over your head. So, you say, no thanks, I've got it, because at least if you do it yourself, you control the outcome. You control the disappointment. Or rather, you eliminate it entirely. This wound is exhausting because it means you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, not because you want to, but because trusting anyone else feels like handing them a loaded weapon. But here's what this wound cost you. By protecting yourself from disappointment, you're also blocking out genuine support, real connection, and the profound relief of not having to do life completely alone. The fourth wound is the debt and obligation terror. And this one runs deep in people who value their autonomy above almost everything else. This wound forms when help always came with strings attached. When nothing was ever freely given. When every act of support was added to an invisible ledger that you'd be expected to repay, often with interest. Psychology research on reciprocity and social exchange theory reveals that people who grew up in environments where help was transactional, where love was conditional, where support was leverage, develop an intense aversion to accepting anything from anyone. Because to them, accepting help means entering into a contract they never agreed to. Think about your past. When people helped you, did they remind you of it? Did they use it to guilt you? Did they expect something in return that you never wanted to give? Your brain remembers. And now, when someone offers help, you don't just see kindness. You see a future obligation, a debt, a loss of freedom. Studies show that people with this wound often describe feeling claustrophobic or trapped when others try to support them. Not because they don't appreciate the gesture, but because their nervous system associates receiving with owing. So, you refuse. You stay independent. You keep your freedom. But what you might not realize is that this wound is also keeping you isolated. Because connection, real intimacy, requires the vulnerability of give and take. And if you can only give, never receive, you're not actually connecting. You're performing. So, what does all this mean? If you can't accept help from others, you're not defective. You're wounded. And there's a massive difference. Wounds can heal. Wounds make sense when you understand where they came from. These 4 independence wounds, the betrayal of vulnerability, the competence equals worth equation, hypervigilance against disappointment, and debt and obligation terror, they were adaptive once. They protected you when you actually were unsafe, unsupported, or exploited. But here's the hard truth. What once protected you is now isolating you. The walls that kept you safe are now keeping you alone. Healing doesn't mean becoming dependent. It doesn't mean losing your strength or your capability. It means learning that accepting help doesn't erase your worth. It means understanding that vulnerability with safe people is actually the deepest form of courage. It means recognizing that you survived by doing everything alone, but you don't have to live that way forever. The next time someone offers you help and every cell in your body screams no, pause. Just for a moment. And ask yourself, what wound just got activated? Which part of my past am I protecting? You might still say no, and that's okay. But at least you'll know it's a choice, not a reflex. At least you'll see the wound for what it is. And maybe, just maybe, with the right person at the right time, you'll take the revolutionary step of saying yes. If this resonated with you, you're going to want to understand why people who overthink everything are actually protecting themselves from a pain most people never see. Subscribe here to discover the hidden psychology behind your restless mind, and why it might be your greatest defense mechanism.